Today is Wednesday, June 23rd, and started off with push presses, and then hang power clean plus power jerks, clean pulls, and rows. So basically, well, not even basically, it is the exact same thing I did as last week, but with some higher weights. And on Monday, I talked a little bit about dipping shorter and quicker on the snatch push presses, and how even though there were reps where it felt like I was dipping too short, like it felt like I didn't go down at all, it was actually watching the video back, it looked fine. There wasn't as much lateral hip movement, obviously, just because my hips weren't going as low. There's just less of an opportunity for lateral movement, and I was getting a lot of power out of it. I was getting a lot of height, and so I tried thinking about that concept and applying it here to these push presses, and it was definitely a huge step forward. Like these push presses, there is still some lateral hip movement, obviously, but it is way better than it's ever looked, and they just felt, the tempo felt right. It didn't feel, because I feel like I spend a little too much time in the dip and at the bottom, and maybe it's not necessarily a matter of too much time, but I feel like I just don't hit the brakes and reverse directions as aggressively as I need to. But here, just thinking about, honestly, as soon as I unlock my knees, just hitting the brakes and going back up, it helped a lot. And yeah, these felt really good. This third set was probably the least good one. I kept sort of sending it forwards, but even these, like, I think 95 was a weight. It was around a weight that I had hit for a single for a push press on Saturday, like 2 weeks ago. And so these felt really easy for 3 triples. So yeah, these felt really solid. And so I wanted to take this concept, this idea, and apply it to the power jerks. And I don't think I did as good of a job. Especially towards in some of the working sets. There were some sets where there wasn't as much hip movement, and like the dip and drive did look better. All things considered, I think there was progress that was made from last week to this week. Just given the fact that I was pushing more weight and I didn't fail anything per se, but there was a lot of lateral hip movement, and as a result, me jumping forwards, and I think, again, objectively, I made progress and it looks better than it has before, but in the moment while I was training, I was just very unhappy, irrationally unhappy with how some of them looked. But so you can see, like, my dip and drive is like better, I guess. That last warm up at 80 right there, I think, the warm ups at with the bar and 60, I feel like I was sending the bar a little bit too high because I was catching it with my legs straight, and so at 80 I was trying to like sort of pull back, but I think my arms weren't locked enough, and so they had bent a little bit when the bar came back down. But it wasn't a huge deal. But so here's my first set. I can't speak. Like it has been for the last few weeks, these hang power cleans aren't really the problem. Although I did kind of have a problem with holding on to the bar. You can see in the next set what I'm talking about specifically. But here in the jerk, you can see that I think the tempo was a little too fast. I think I was dipping too fast because you can see I'm moving down faster than the bar is, which creates that sort of disconnect. And once that disconnect is there, it's like the power that I can output is a lot less efficient. But even so, I got the requisite height. There you can see I just lost my grip, my hook grip, like as I was trying to get it back down for the third set, or the third rep. I think it was the chalk, or maybe a combination of the bar and the chalk, but yeah, I just couldn't hang on to the bar like I usually could. And so from this set on, I just started using my own chalk, and I think it was a little bit better. But anyways, yeah, that second set also had a little bit of jump forwards. I think this third set was probably the best jerk. There was, I think, the least amount of hip movement and the least amount of jumping forwards, although it does happen. But yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty solid. Like, watching these videos, I really didn't have that much of a reason to be upset about how things went. Although in retrospect, given how well that third jerk was, I should have just stopped there. And then this fourth set was also like not that bad. And so if I couldn't have stopped for the third set, I should have stopped here. But I was just feeling really picky, I guess, and like had somewhat of misplaced expectations based off of how the power or the push presses went. I was expecting everything to be corrected and perfect after seeing how well the push presses went and like how well I was able to apply the snatch push press idea of the dip and drive from Monday, like how well I was able to apply that to these push presses. I was hoping I'd be able to do the same to the power jerks, but because they just weren't going like perfectly, I was upset. So again, misplaced expectations. And then this last power jerk is definitely the worst one. I like jump forward the most, my hips move the most. It almost looks like I'm like hip thrusting. So it is, given how I'm moving right there, like it was inevitable that I was going to jump forwards a lot. So I think part of why I didn't feel very good about this lift or this workout was just because I had ended it on like a bad note, I guess. I think had I been smart enough to cut it off after set 3 or set 4, I probably would have felt better about this day. But yeah, I'm still pretty immature in how I handle emotions and like my mental with lifting, because watching these videos after some time after the session, they look fine, they look better, I'm making progress, but it's just in the moment I can get all up in my head and stuff like that. And like for the rest of the workout, I just sort of put my headphones in and like didn't really talk because I was just like not happy, which is so dumb, but yeah, that's just kind of how the day went. Yeah, and then these clean pulls and floating clean pulls, thinking about trying to stay over the bar for as long as possible, and then leaning back at the right timing after extension, not before extension, like trying to stay over the bar for as long as possible, but then once I extend, leaning back and just getting that timing down. And these were a little bit better than last week too. Last week I just remember it feeling very heavy at 125. This didn't feel any lighter per se, but I was more aware of controlling the way I was moving despite it being heavy. Whereas last week I was just letting the weight on the bar sort of dictate how I move, because I was like throwing my head back and doing a bunch of things that I don't usually do in the clean. But so yeah, these were better. I think almost in pretty much every aspect, every lift, things were better than last week. But sometimes, a lot of times, weightlifting is just very mental. So just need to process these things better and more objectively. But yeah, that's how that went.